night hoodie as well, Robin. Go on.
Oh dear.
But it's good that we can all connect, you know. I really appreciate
Hallelujah.
it. This is good.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Trust me, it's a blessing, man.
It's good.
We're doing it at this time because Craig was like, please, like, I need to break my fast at 8. So
Hey, listen, my little man goes to bed at 8 o'clock, you know. I like bedtime. I like it when it's to bed. So
yeah. So we're live on Facebook now. So you can just greet people as they're listening on Facebook. And I'm just gonna do yeah, let me see. Start live streaming. Yeah, so it should be on. It's on Facebook. I don't think I can do the YouTube thing. So
if you can WhatsApp, are you able to WhatsApp or something so we can send on to people?
The link. If someone could go on the link, Matthew, could you go on the link on the Facebook on your phone or something?
Yeah, I'll check it now.
Yeah, and see if that's there.
If you can
All
send
right,
it to
guys,
me,
we're gonna go live. We're gonna admit people in.
Okay.
Hopefully they'll be muted. Please make this work.
Yeah, it's working.
You're unmuted.
Yeah.
Nathan, it works, you know.
It's working.
Yeah, it is working. I've got the link as well.
It's got a bit of a lag, but obviously depending on where you watch, that's not a lag, so we're live, but it's working now.
Okay, fantastic, awesome, excellent. So yeah, for those who are listening and those who are on our Zoom, we're just getting set up. We're going to meet as much people in as possible. How we're going to run today's conference is all of you that are joining us through Zoom, you're going to be muted, but there's going to be a section within the conference stroke meeting where we're going to unmute people at different times. And how we're going to do that, if you want to make a contribution when we get to the debate bit, is if you look on the bottom of your screen, those who are listening, welcome. There should be a reactions button. So can we just test that everyone can see the reaction button? And if you want to ask a question when we get to the discussion bit, just put the thumbs up. So can we just test that, please, everybody? Excellent. Yes! Thumbs up. That's working. Okay. Also, what we're proposing to do is also use the chat function, which is there, and you just say hello. So I'm going to do hello, everyone. Yep. Yep. Hello, everyone. Darren's back. That's good. So yeah. So over to this conference in terms of sounding the alarm. I really wanted to thank everybody for joining us and being with us. This is really it's an honor and it's humbling to be able to just do this with my brothers and sisters and colleagues that are around Birmingham, the West Midlands, doing hard work. Obviously, many of us would have seen the very tragic and disturbing footage of a young man being fatally murdered in our streets in Smethwick. And I really wanted to start off this conversation with a moment of silence, just to have a moment of silence for that family and for others that we've lost during tragic circumstances like this. And after the moment of silence, I'll give a bit more housekeeping and we'll get on to the program. So thank you to those who are listening on Facebook. Please feel free to share the link. This is our first time live streaming a Zoom meeting, so hopefully it'll all work. But yeah, we're going to do a moment of silence now, just in respect and memory of the young man who tragically lost his life yesterday. Thank you, everybody. Thank thank you for that moment of silence. Truly, we are in unprecedented times as a community, as a nation, the world, globally, with COVID-19. And when we have things like youth violence, it just adds to the pain, it adds to the devastation. And really, I was, up this morning and I was praying and I was just like reflecting. I was actually crying. I was in tears, just a loads of emotion. And then after all of that emotion, I just felt that, I wanted to do a conference or some kind of meeting where I gathered some of the practitioners. This is not everybody. This is just a handful of the amazing amount of practitioners that we have in Birmingham in the West Midlands doing a lot of frontline work. And I just know it was confirmation because Craig phoned me really early and I was trying to get to call him and I was thinking to call him about 8:30, but I thought it might be a bit disrespectful to phone him so early. And then he phoned me first and I spoke to him and he says, yeah, let's just do this. So I really want to say thank you everybody for being here and listening. We do have in a program, we've got different contributors that are going to contribute. Some people have presentations that they're going to share with us. Some people are just going to literally just share from their heart. If you're just joining us, we are going to have a time on this Zoom where we can connect with each other and have a discussion, an interactive discussion. But thank you everyone for being with us. Just in terms of housekeeping, we are recording this meeting. So for those who don't want to be a part of it, you're viewing Richard's screen. I don't know why Richard Daly's screen is, you're viewing Richard's screen. Please don't do this now. Stop participant sharing. Hopefully, please, Lord, I don't want one of these stupid hacks to happen while we're doing this. But yeah, we are recording this. It's on Facebook Live. So if you don't want to be seen, please just keep your video, stop video at the bottom of your screen. You literally can stop the video, and that should allow you to stop showing your face. But I would just like to ask at this point if Reverend Carver Anderson from Bringing Hope Organization will just say a few words before we start, and then we're going to hear from our first contributor, which is going to be Sabrina Dennis, CEO of First Class Legacy.
All right. Nathan and Sabrina and Craig, as you spoke this morning, thank you so very much for the invite into this. We're here in a lot of pain, if I'm honest, because nearly 21,000 people from across this country have died, and from amongst us, we know at least 20, I know at least 20 people personally that's passed. One is a family member. So here we are today amidst the lockdown, as we are in lockdown, or else we wouldn't be like this. There are some crazy things happening in our community on the streets, and young people, the notion of lockdown doesn't apply to some of them. So what is it today in our hearts as people, and this is intergenerational because I know that I'm of the more senior age of people who say that, Carver, you're 60 plus, so you're of a particular generation. But I am still very deeply concerned. And as I look,
sorry,
that's fine, Nathan, at the trauma, there's people right now in trauma. Without what's happening on the street, we are traumatized by just being at home. This is not the norm. This is abnormal. This is not the norm for us. So what are we going to do today? I would hope that emerging from this conversation, we will all have something. We will leave the conference to say, you know what? I have something to do and will be doing to change the environment that I'm in, whether it's via Zoom, it's WhatsApp, it's Snapchat, whatever it is. And as a man of faith, and maybe not everyone's a people of faith here, but all these people that have died, we've had to engage with people from a faith perspective, whether it was through the mosque or the temple or the Gurdwara or the church. So I'm just saying here today, I'm excited about this conversation. So Nathan, thank you again, because I believe emerging from this, we could be a catalyst for change in our own. So it starts with me. So my screen there, it starts with me right now. So thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Carver. I'm just going to ask Sabrina from First Class Legacy, but mainly from the Kitchen Table Talks, just to give a thought and to share some of the stuff that we've been doing very briefly. And then straight after Sabrina, we'll hear from Craig Pickney, who's a criminologist, urban specialist, and the director of the Center for Youth Violence and Conflict. So Sabrina, I'll start to share your screen, and hopefully this will work. Oh my God, what's all this? That's too many presentations there. Oh my God. Hopefully that works.
There it is.
Let's go back. Sorry, I'm sending the wrong ones. Let's go there.
Back. That's
Yeah.
it. So good afternoon, everyone, or even good evening nearly. Hope you're all well and keeping safe. So yes, as Nathan explained, I'm Sabrina Dennis, Nathan's wife, but also the CEO of First Class Legacy and the founder of Kitchen Table Talks. So Kitchen Table Talks is a platform that I created about 4 years ago to bring together parents and practitioners and young people to share and talk about issues that they might be going through. Things like the fear of missing out on social media, helping parents to understand what even is social media. At the time, it was fairly new. Snapchat and stuff like that was coming out, and it was sort of taking the place by storm, and parents were kind of blindsided by it. So we're doing a little bit of training on that, but also having an opportunity for them to share how they feel about it. Also to kind of speak with young people, particularly young girls, around FOMO, the fear of missing out, signing up for stuff, sexting, sharing images and things like that online. So fast forward to where we are today in 2020, we've been going since 2017. It's a commissioned service now by different youth services, so in Walsall and Sandwell and Birmingham. And we are working together with different types of people to address certain issues. In November last year, we hosted a conference called Let's Address It. You might have seen it. And we were addressing things around county lines, mental health in young people, and also serious youth violence, because at the time, county lines and youth violence was just absolutely going off the scales. We were hearing every week of a stabbing, of a shooting. We were hearing children going missing. Every minute on my Facebook, there was a missing child appearing, and people weren't really sure what was going on. They were disappearing, but parents in particular were thinking that children were probably just being kidnapped, when actually they were taking themselves off to run a drugs line, to go from Birmingham to, I don't know, somewhere in the countryside, down to Somerset. People have been found in Devon, as far as Scotland, and it was children as young as 9 and 10 years old that were being affected by it. So we did a conference to address it, to really talk about what these things are and what it means for our community. Can I have the next slide, please, Nathan? So within Kitchen Table Talks, we've been looking at the impact of social media, new technology. There's a thing that's happened. We don't have landline phones anymore. I mean, I had a conversation this week with my dad about this. He was saying, why haven't you got a house phone? So no one uses the house phone. And that actually that's become a problem in many households. Once upon a time, the phone would ring, and if it was for me and I was a young girl, my dad would answer the phone and he would say, who is it, who's calling? And there'd be automatic barrier or protection between me and the other person at the end of the phone. If it was somebody that didn't sound right, or somebody that was a lot older than me, it was a male, it was a boy, there's no chance a boy could phone my house and get through to me without passing my dad first. That didn't happen. But nowadays, we don't have that anymore. Everybody's got a device. I've got 2 mobile phones sitting next to me right now, business one and my personal one. And, we can access absolutely anything. Now, most children are given a mobile phone at the age of 7 or 8 now. They're not even at senior school. They've got one before they go to senior school for gaming or for staying in contact with people. But that means they can also get in contact with strangers, that have got access to a whole world of things that are out there, things on YouTube, things on Twitter, things on Instagram, things on Snapchat. we've seen house party now in the time of COVID-19. We're using technology more than ever. But does that mean that we know what our young people are looking at? And do we know what's controlling them? So if you notice a change in your child's behavior, it could have been because of the things that they've been looking at, they've been exposed to, certain lifestyles, following Instagram people who are famous and wealthy, but don't show how they've got to their success. They just show the product placement and all the cash. So there's lots of things to think about when we're talking through the changes in technology and the barriers in terms of protecting our young children, in particular sexting and being groomed and becoming a prey for a predator for a young child. So that's that one. Can I have the next one? So there's a real whistle-stop tour. This isn't even anywhere near how much stuff we cover, but it's just a sort of an overview of the types of things we talk about. So I use this slide to talk about the control and what is it that's manipulating our children. Like, for instance, this image is a puppet on a string, and I do think there are certain factors that have our children being manipulated and moved in different directions that they wouldn't necessarily want to go down. Now, some children are willingly taking themselves off and doing things like county lines, but they're thinking about the outcome, they're thinking about the money, they're thinking about the cash, they're not thinking about the things in between and the tragedy and the trauma that they could be exposing themselves and their families to. So the question I pose to every single parent and practitioner and person in general is, who or what is controlling our children? And I'm leaving that as a thought. I use this slide to talk about the state that we're in today. So the word anarchy, and it's a state of disorder, of non-recognition of authority or other controlling systems. And that's where we see ourselves today. Now, we know that the government has enforced a lockdown. We know that we're not supposed to go out unless it's for food, essential food, exercise, and if we have to go to work in another place other than our home. So really, that is the rules that have been confined to our environment at the moment. As Carver rightly said earlier, there are some people that just don't follow the rules, they don't fit into that, they won't listen to that. They've never obliged with the system, and now the system's telling them this, it's like another thing they don't want to do. It's really important that we think about the outcome of what that could mean. We have to ensure that there's order in public, but there has to be order in our homes. It comes from our homes first, as in parenting. For single parents, we can't just leave them to be managing their children alone. We've got to support them and offer support around them. That's the next slide then, please. And finally, this can lead to, and has led to, and is leading to, feelings of isolation. We often misunderstand the behavior of young people that they're putting out there because of the things that they're feeling. Sometimes they're not good at articulating how they feel. And so they isolate, they're withdrawn, and we have them in other programs around mental health. So it's really a case of my suggestions and tips would be to start asking questions in our homes with our family members, checking in. We do it at home, we do it in our business. How are you? Having this debate and discussion and learning the art of conversation, understanding what they're looking at and thinking through, the next slide's fine, thinking about it. If we can get young people to talk and share how they're feeling and what they're going through, we can save them from the fire that's burning, because let's face it, this is a fire that has been ignited and is just going from one place to the next. We have got a fire burning in Birmingham, got it in Solihull, we've got it in Warsaw, we've got it everywhere. There has to be a way we do things differently, not doing things the same. So if we save the children from the fire, we end up saving ourselves and the community around us. That's my short 8-minute presentation. I think I've gone over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Now we're going to hear from a dear friend, and we all should know him if we're from the West Midlands, now a national speaker. He's Mr. Craig Pickney, and I know he's got a lot on his heart. I am going to put the timer on, but you can obviously, Craig, because I love you, have extra time. Yeah, Craig Pickney, thank you.
I will try not to take up too much time, because I just would hope that the conversation or the points that I'm going to make at least would kind of spark some discussions. And I think maybe the conversations that we have with our audience, I think that's where the learning will take place. So I know from my perspective, I don't want to give too much time. I think I want to just kind of start with the kind of feeling that I've had over the last 24 hours. My feeling's been a bit of one of anger, another of frustration. I think the third, pain. And I'll explain why. Because as professionals, we always talk about this notion of self-care. And we talk about, taking time off, looking after each other, ensuring that our mental well-being is protected whilst working with children and young people and their families affected by a range of different issues. Now, many of us practice this or now have begun to practice this. And I remember my phone being off for the whole day and turning on my phone just to have a look at an email. I was bombarded with a number of WhatsApp videos, and without knowing what the WhatsApp videos were, I didn't know nothing about what was going on in the news. I wasn't talking to anybody in the day. I pressed play and seen a video, and the video for me was quite extreme and quite brutal and fatal. And my initial response to the individual that sent me was, "Why did you send me the video?" Of which this was a professional. And there was a number of professionals, and I'm not here to name and shame anything like that, but it's about context. Because many of us know, we've just buried another man or young man from our community, one of our soldiers' children. And many of us are still dealing with that. So any image or video that kind of resonates, for me personally, that was the first thing that came to my head. So my frustration was mainly about this idea that as professionals, we always talk about being trauma informed. We talk about this notion of, understanding this idea that our children and young people are becoming desensitized to violence. But yet we as the professionals fall into the same trap of the young people by sharing a video without even thinking. And then I asked a bigger question: what about if I was with my son? What about if I was with my daughter and I just happened to press play because I didn't know the context of the video? So my frustration is not so much about the video in terms of the content, even though that brings pain, more so about why don't we give each other warnings anymore? Because if we're seeking to challenge young people on the mindset, then where do we stand as so-called trauma-informed professionals working in the community with their families and trying to inspire, trying to motivate, and trying to enable people to open up and have conversations of which they generally wouldn't have conversations about? So waking up this morning, it's been an interesting one because I've been doing some outreach work with young people, during the whole COVID scenario. Sabrina had mentioned the whole idea that there's, this idea of a lockdown and people not abiding to this particular notion. And it kind of brings me back to a conversation that many of you remember that I had about 6 weeks ago, where I made a series of predictions based on a number of research and a number of reports that was coming out that was looking at the concepts of violence around different regions within the UK. And I said that my concern was mainly 3 things, and I'm going to say 4 tonight just for our audience to get us to think. And the first thing was the understanding of what this virus is and how it's transmitted and what is an outbreak, the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic, and what is the education of our children and young people that may be affected by these particular things. And my concern was that due to the misunderstanding or the ignorance or the lack of knowledge of what this pandemic is, you're going to have people behaving as if it's just a normal cold, because it doesn't ultimately affect them directly. And the only way in which they're going to respond accordingly to what the government set out as their guidelines is only when it starts to affect their grandparents, their uncles, their aunties, their parents. And that may help us to explain why we just see these behaviors in specific areas around our city where people are just kind of having this approach of doing what they please. My second concern, if you remember, I also spoke about the idea of exploitation. As we know that companies, businesses, small or large, are being impacted up and down the country. And we also know that the import and export of goods into the country is also being impacted. So I made a claim and made an assertion that whilst all of these companies are being impacted, so is the drug supply that comes into the country. And then what we're going to see as a consequence of the impact of the drug supply, organized criminals are going to find new ways in order to make that money. So exploitation and the door to exploitation is going to be extended, and we're going to see more young people going missing. We're going to see more young people taking and making risky, poor life choices, and so on and so forth. And then the other thing that I was also concerned about is the idea of boredom. And I think Sabrina also alluded to that idea as well. We're talking about young people inside of their household, many of which that are abiding to the government's guidelines. But at nighttime, you know, social media comes alive, and, you know, you just look around now, there's a different challenge every single day. There's a different meme that's kind of circulated every single day. And then now we have online platforms where individuals that are celebrities utilize this as an opportunity to show our children and young people porn. And I remember speaking to a particular father not too long ago, and his 12-year-old had asked the question, "Dad, do you know who Swarms and Tory Lanez is?" And for the audience, if you don't know who these two characters are, I think you need to start having conversations with your children about what's out there on the social media platforms. And due to boredom, as we know that young people are utilizing social media networks much more, not all necessarily negative, but whilst they're utilizing these different social media platforms, a series of other behaviors are now starting to take place. So for example, we know that there's a social media platform called House Party, and on House Party, there's been a number of reports where young people from opposing groups are utilizing these platforms to argue, to debate, and also to show each other weapons, which goes back to my last point about youth violence. And if we take into consideration of 3 points that I've made prior, the issue that we see in our communities is also regional, because you may have read some of the newspaper articles that came out over the last 2 weeks that made a suggestion that violence has somehow ceased due to the lockdown. And I would ask that question of, depending on what vantage point and depending on what region. So whereas I speak to a lot of my colleagues in London and they say that knife crime is not so much an issue during the lockdown, coming from the gun crime capital in the West Midlands, we're seeing a very different story in a picture here, of which there's been a number of shootings, some reported, some unreported. Many of us in this forum right now have had to respond to those families where those particular issues are taking place. So it leaves us to now start to ask new questions, ultimately what is going on. Because one of the things that I appreciate, especially from those that are on the panel, is that we're not just about having conversations just to have conversations. We're very much solution focused. So whilst I commend my soldiers that are on the panel and those that I can also see in the chat, we have to still continue to push, despite the fact that another life has been taken in our communities. And I think that one of the things that I guess want to talk about is youth culture, because we don't talk about youth culture enough. We can talk about poverty, we can talk about racism, we can talk about the issues that exist within households, domestic violence, mental health, and a whole range of other things. But I think what we need to also now start to talk about is youth culture of today. And what youth culture is, what does it manifest into? What are our children and young people buying into as a form of youth culture? And then how do we respond? And I think if we are talking about a response, it's about understanding what that is, because that response ultimately is that our children and young people are buying into a culture of which is nihilistic, sadistic, and violent. And whether you're involved in criminality or not, young people are becoming victim to that particular mindset and youth culture. And I think as an audience, it's something that we need to discuss. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Craig. Just thank you. Thank you for all your work. I just take this opportunity as we're streaming on live Facebook and with colleagues and friends. on this Zoom platform, just to say thank you, Craig, for everything that you've doing and you have done in our city and nationally and internationally. Just really want to thank you and appreciate you, because I know you've been out in a particular way because you've been focused on doing your PhD at the moment. So I just really wanted just to share love and to say thank you. And we'll hear more from you when we go to our panel discussion. So thank you. Now we're going to hear from another colleague, friend, Mr. Darren Leville, who I've asked to share just some thoughts around trauma, because in particular with this footage that's gone around, we have to think that when you think of that scene, for those who've seen it, there's those who are there who are going to be going through their own trauma. There's going to be those who was recording the incident, and there's those who are seeing it. So I was asking Darren to just, from the Epiphany people, to just share a thought with your presentation. So I'm going to just check. Darren, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me all okay?
Yep. So I'm going to try and attempt to share your PowerPoint while you're speaking. Okay. Is that all right, sir?
That's fine.
Awesome. Please don't laugh at us if it goes wrong. You're trying.
Okay. So for me, you know, thanks Nathan for calling me this morning and asking me to do this piece. And it just quite occurred to me, you know, at a time when we're dealing with a pandemic and a time that we're dealing with this disease, I thought, you know what, treating trauma like a disease, because which almost pretty much takes that whole public health approach. Next slide, please. So at a time when we're in self-isolation and we're supposed to be on lockdown, the isolating of incidents that are traumatic is kind of crucial. So in terms of our responses, going back to what Craig was saying around, okay, so I've received this on my phone, am I sharing it? Who am I sending it to? So I got it sent to me from a friend, exactly the same way. Press play, and it stopped me in my tracks. Because if anybody knows me, I've lost my son, and that took me right back to that. So then it also got me thinking about the networking of trauma and how trauma is networked and shared. So obviously when in terms of this video, it's been shared via videos online platforms, WhatsApp, so forth. But in terms of also when we're looking about the networks around trauma, I sort of want us to think about where did the incident take place? Who witnessed it? Who knew the individual? What schools, colleges, clubs did they belong to? The family, and where did they live? Because these are all, when we're talking around in terms of trauma, even they would, you know, of course, be impacted. And then moving on to the next point around sharing of newspaper articles. Now, I think many of us who are on the front line have pretty much reconsidered how we do this, and whether it's okay or whether we feel it's right to just share articles. And I've noticed that there's been a shift from practitioners on the front line, and we seem to be doing that a lot less, because where the problem really lies is when you get some fool jump onto the post and making some comments, and it's usually around victim blaming. Well, boy, if they're drug dealing, then they must deserve it, or whatever else. So these are the sort of things I wanted to consider. And then again, sorry, if we just go back to the previous slide. If we consider around sharing and press again, do murder trials, for example, need to have live updates every minute pinging up on your phone? I've got a screenshot on my phone of when one of the offenders was given a life sentence for killing my son, and that personifies trauma to me. Next slide, please. So in terms of vicarious or secondary trauma, I think we're all victims of it on this talk. So Vicarious and secondary trauma means basically we may not have necessarily been there, but we've heard about it and it's impacted us. So when that's perhaps where we need to look at the mapping of trauma. So very similar to what some countries have done in terms of finding out who's been impacted by COVID-19. They've gone in and looked at and thought, right, we need to map and trace who's been impacted. So who's been impacted? Then we need to consider ourselves as professionals. Are we having such things like clinical supervision? Are we writing this into our funding proposals? Are we absolutely seeking this, and how often are we having it? Then we also need to think about the young people who have witnessed, seen this, and what impact it's had on them. The families, of course, you know, they're going through it. I know, I can pretty much be sure I know exactly what they're going through right now. A stage of numbness, disbelief, blindness is what the first few days pretty much consist of. And also the institutions that may be involved with this young person. Like I said, schools and the local area, the fact that it was just there in that shopping area. And for many families, some of them have lost their children or lost their loved ones on their own doorstep, or somewhere not too far away, so they can never really escape the trauma. Next slide, please. So I think one of the key things we need to do is check in with our children, because what have they seen and how has it impacted them? Have they gone quiet? How is it impacting them? How do they feel? How is this impacting how they feel and how they're thinking? Has it changed their feelings of safety and their emotional and mental well-being? Now, with young people, even if it's a friend of, they're impacted by that trauma. Even if they don't directly know that person, they're impacted by that trauma, and may take steps to protect themselves, i.e. carrying weapons and so forth. Next slide, please. Also check in with those who may be re-traumatized. So think about the families that have been impacted. So a sharing of the post like this, it brings it right back up again, right raw as perhaps the day. Now, when we're talking about re-traumatization and trauma means that your life will never quite be the same again. So in my terms, a Thursday was never the same again. In terms of my terms, again, at the 17th, the number 17 has a totally different meaning. And this is how it sort of happens and affects us. So, you know, in terms of thinking about us as the young people and the professionals, we need to think about who's being re-traumatized, and start reaching out to them also. Next slide, please. So we're from a culture, we're from a community of people that don't talk. We've got wall of silence. We deal with it in ourselves. We've got strong Black women. We've got masculine Black men that need to man up. So in terms of the whole notion of seeking therapy, how does that work? Well, actually, what needs to sort of happen is it actually takes for us organizations that are on this chat at the moment, a lot of the time, just giving that same type of support where we're just here as companionship, a listening ear, compassion, empathy, until they get therapy ready. So for us as community organizations, we do play a massive part in offering and initiating the healing process, although the healing process does take a lifetime. And we also need to consider the fact that there needs to be a need for culturally competent therapy that reaches out to us, and therapy where we can see ourselves and we're represented. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Darren. I know that's hard for you, because
Yes.
obviously you're not a practitioner just coming from an academic perspective, but we've lived the experience, and I wanted to say thank you so much. because I know trauma is something that you've had to go through, and now you're living it and practicing it. So I just want to say thank you for that, and I hope that those who are listening really benefit from the advice and words that you're saying. I don't know what's happening with the screen, but sometimes I don't know. It seems like someone, I don't know who that is jumping in and somehow controlling the screen. So just bear with us. I hope we can get through this and get to the end of it. But I'm praying that we'll just get through and everything will just go all the way through where it needs to be. Next, we're going to ask for, and for those who just joined us, welcome. Just so you know, we've got a few more presentations, and then we're going to open up the floor, so to speak. But the opening of the floor is not going to be just unmuting everyone. We're going to try and use the reaction button. So if everyone looks down the bottom of the screen, you can see a button called reaction. And if you want to ask a question when we get to the discussion, if you just put your thumb up like that, and I'm going to try and get to as many people as possible. So could everyone just test that just to see if that's working? Also, if that doesn't work, we're going to use the chat function where we can type something in to kind of chat. Yeah? Okay, cool. Excellent, thank you. So now I'm going to ask Clancy Williams, who's the director of Angels Without Wings. She's a qualified drama therapist, and I've really asked her to come in and just give us some practical advice for those who are listening who may be going through trauma. I am personally like a fan of counseling. Me, myself, on a number of occasions, 3 significant things that have happened: supporting a family in Ladywood, supporting a family in Erdington, of both who were tragically murdered through gun violence, and doing some work with Birmingham Children's Trust, and working with a young man who I felt that we didn't support enough, and I was carrying a lot of guilt and stuff. So I personally went to supervision and seeked having personal therapy just to unpack thoughts in my mind. So I would say to any practitioner that are listening is that don't think you're too big or too strong to seek supervision or personal therapy. So we're going to hear from Clancy now, who's going to give us some tips from her expertise. Clancy, welcome.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's great. It's kind of sobering, really, to be having this kind of meeting and this time as a result of recent happenings. And I almost feel a sense of sadness that, you know, we don't call ourselves together, call ourselves to order outside of situations like this, in order to be able to continue to support ourselves in body, mind, and spirit. And there are a number of things I think that people, that Darren and Craig mentioned about being able to protect yourself at this time, and the challenges of having the type of social media that we have at the moment, which is enabling our young people and ourselves to some extent to become desensitized to what we're actually seeing. Now, one of the things is once you see an image, it's very difficult to unsee it, and it will be there in people's sleeps, and people can be re-traumatized by that in their sleep. And actually people can be re-traumatized while they're walking around and have what we call waking flashbacks of what they've seen. So I think there are a couple of things that, you know, just seem kind of practical. And I want to kind of put the kind of tips that you asked me to think about or suggestions on the back of a conversation I had with my daughter today, who was sent the image. And like Craig, there was no warning. Somebody just sent it to her and she opened it. I had been sent that same image 12 times today and hadn't opened not one of them. Now, for me, that was my spirit saying that is not supposed to be opened. But if there was no caption or anything, it was going to be difficult for people to be able to not open something like that. And I think the media and these platforms have an awful lot to answer to in terms of not creating a vice that enables us to have some sort of warning when explicit material is going to be coming up. Just like if you go on to YouTube and you want to type in, you know, some sort of service. Now, I believe that you have to state that your age, your particular age. Yes, you can lie about your age, but at least it gives some sort of warning. And so that's one of the things that I think, yes, we as individuals can play our part. And as Darren said, yes, we need to check in with our children, check if there is any mood change. And it can be very subtle, the mood change. We know our children best. But also when you were talking, Nathan, about, sorry, Darren was mentioning about as a people, we don't talk. And I think there is something about, for me, it's not that we don't talk, we have a way of communicating that's not necessarily like how the West communicates. So we won't necessarily come.
Clancy's gone.
I think Clancy's frozen. Give her 30 seconds to see if she'll unfreeze. If not, we'll move on to the next agenda item. So yeah, I think she's frozen. Clancy, if you can hear me, we will try and bring you back in to wrap up what you were saying. But I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Hopefully I can mute. Unmute us. I'm not sure what's happening there. So I'm going to move on to Dr. Reverend Carver Anderson and Reverend Robin Thompson to share now, and then we'll try and see if we can get Clancy back on after. If not, we'll just go straight to the panel discussion. So thank you, Clancy, for what you were saying so far. We appreciate you, if you can hear me. So over to Carver and Robin, thank you. Do you want me to share your screen or just?
Yeah, yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me, everybody, please? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'd just like to thank you very much again, Nathan. I'd just like to start off by saying that all of us who are listening in today, we're all people who've been children at one point. So there are methods, perspectives, approaches about how children develop. And all the young people that we are concerned about are from a family of some description. So the life cycle perspective, which I developed when I was doing the gangs and violence report, says, you know what? There's birth, home, family, friends, faith, community, those who are people of faith. It starts somewhere. So these young people have seen things in their homes, some of them, and from there they go to school, don't they? Look at the cycle. Where do we as practitioners get involved in the cycle before they died either prematurely or they die naturally? Now, a lot of our young people, that young man, it was so sad. That was shared with me quite a few times and it disturbed me. And those of you who saw it, saw a young man's life just taken away like that. So where did he go to school? I think Darren mentioned it. Where did he socialize? What is his background? How was he feeling? What was his thought? What was the altercation? So in this cycle, there's something as practitioners that we need to ask the question, have we got a relationship with all these young people and young adults who we are concerned about? And trust is a crucial word. Look at moving on. They all have to make decisions and mature one way or the other. And just moving on very quickly. Nathan, if you go to the next slide for me, please. Now, all of these young people that have passed away, they have a pre-conception birth context. Before they were born, their father, their mother, there was a context before they entered this world. What was that like? We talk about ACEs. So if we look at the whole notion of ACEs, being exposed to pain, anguish, trauma, cussing, swearing, seeing things, seeing guns, seeing knives, see all of that. So there's a context that children are born into. Then it goes to the competing, the birth and home family, sorry, and community. Where are they growing up? Where are they socializing? Where are they seeing things? What is the notion of the road? And you know what I want to say here? Those of us who don't really know young people from the streets, from the road is hard. The road, the street, the ends, as they call it, is hard. So survival is difficult. So the socialization and learning is taking place there. So if home hasn't got a moral compass and a moral empowerment and challenging, and back to what we're saying, the social media now, all the young people have their own social media platforms, 99% of them. So going on then, knowledge, understanding, and their ethics. As a man of faith who, with Reverend Thompson, we've buried a number of people. And I want to just say, what is the ethical and the moral DNA of these young men, young women who are growing up in a nihilistic way, in an expression that you think, what were you thinking that you could have just head top someone and go and buy chicken and chips? And those of you who've seen that, they just went into the shop and laughing and joking. So what is that? And moving on very quickly to the effect and the impact, which is down the last, second to last, effect and impact and outcomes from decisions that have been made. And then the death, which is premature, of these young people. I want to ask the question as people who are here today, what is your contribution in building trust with men and women who have been labeled and vilified and said, you know what, they're hard to reach? Well, hard to reach for who? Next slide, please, Nathan, before I ask Robin to jump in. So we've been around this for the past 20 years. I'm a second generation, so I was a young person myself, and a lot of the people that I grew up with are the fathers of some of these young people now. But this here, click again, please, Nathan. This is too late. Thank you, Nathan. This is the ultimate price. It's too late at this point. I said to Robin a few years ago, Robin, I don't want to bury anybody else. And he says, Carver, when someone is traumatized and a family is traumatized, we've got to show them love and care. And I don't want to go through the whole grieving process at the moment, because this young man who's just passed away, the grieving process is almost going to be put on hold for some people, because I don't think his friends, if they're going to bury him, will be able to go to his funeral. Next one, please, Nathan. So very quickly before Robin jumps in, I'm a practical theologian. So I believe that if I am going to use my faith in action, then I just don't talk faith. I'm not asking people to become Christians that way. I'm not evangelizing. I'm literally saying that there's something about my faith, about love, care, compassion, insight, protection, sensitivity that is important. So if there's a current experience and a context that we need to look at in the pastoral cycle, then I need to know, well, what is it? It's similar to the Mercer public health framework that says we need to understand the challenges together. And then we need to explore them, ask the critical questions. As some of these questions been asked today. Ask some critical questions. And then you know what? There has to be a process when we are on the ground. We can't talk from the detached. We have to be on the ground. And if you look at that cycle there, it says that there's something about a theology that we need to consider. Those people who may be people of faith or non-faith, there's a moral framework that we have to consider. And who's challenging young people about their moral and ethical responsibility to care for each other? So Robin, do you want to just end with the consideration from a bringing hope perspective, please? Robin.
Yeah, thanks, Garth. Nathan, well done for putting this together. When you texted me this morning, I was like, I don't want another talk for the sake of talking. And what people can see here, and I thank everyone who has spoken already, is beyond the talk, we have a challenge now of how do we move to action? And here, this intersectionality, I first heard about this from my colleague and friend, Dr. Martin Glynn, many years ago. And it's evolved as we've been immersed in the work. So from a bringing hope context, and this diagram here is not bringing hope alone. It's each and every one of us in some way, shape or form. I think Darren alluded to it earlier. It's going to take a village, but everybody in the village, we need to consider what's my strength and role so that we can strengthen one another. Because as Craig says, sometimes you try and lock off, it's not easy. Even in COVID, I found it difficult to shut off because it's constant. And one thing Nathan asked us to bring out is what are some of the attitude or mindsets do we think why I says to someone the other day in my team, it's only police and thief on the road after certain hours, you know. Think about it. It's only police and thief, using that terminology. It's for those who are from a 70s background, you remember the tune, police and thief in the street. But right now, after certain hours, we know that it's only certain people out there. And if you look at this diagram, it's talking about peer support, moral and spiritual reflection, mentoring, group work, pastoral care, one-to-one, personal development, counseling, family intervention, workshop and prayer. That's the little bit that we try and achieve to as an organization, but we know we can't do that alone. So the question for us to lead into debate, I suppose, is how are we going to mobilize collectively? What are the ingredients we're going to need? And I was writing down from each speaker's point around trauma and trauma coming back, and how do you deal after all when somebody get cold-hearted and say, "I'm done with it. I'm gonna keep man get me done." And that don't have to be a young person. That can be mommy, that can be daddy, that can be granddad. There's a mindset which is we've allowed to be acceptable, which I believe in this lockdown, we have to look within ourselves as a people and start to ask the question, are we willing to break across that mode? Nathan, no, I thought that was you that was writing in on the screen, snitch and this. Yo, nobody now snitch. We care about this thing. When you say to that mom or to that dad, what coffin do you want to choose? What is it that what color do you want to dress the coffin? When you have to look that family in the eye who are in that shock mode, as Darren referenced to it, and have to look them in the eye and say, listen, so if we ain't coming to want to change things, you know what, I want to back off then. Because nobody now talk to nobody, we are talk to ourselves here. And that is the reality. We're not snitching. It's not snitching. We're taking responsibility for our community. And we have to then start from somewhere. So there was something about when that was being said, and Craig, you talked about the trauma and people sending that to you. I was selective in who I sent it to. There's only 2 people. Because I didn't want to traumatize, but we were talking about the same thing. And there's something about our genuineness and truthfulness to collectively work together to try and post-COVID, when the unlock and restriction is lifted and while the restriction is in, we've got to think about how we're going to move forward together. And Sister Clancy, before she went off, talking about re-traumatizing. And then when Sabrina, you were mentioned at the very beginning, almost the grooming of this generation. And me call it fast book, me a old age somebody. So me call it, I don't use it, but I use it to see what people are doing. So if I can do that, just to try and keep on top of things, how much more can others do? And I noticed in the chat now, even someone put in there, they've got technology to help parents map we have to bring everything in the toolbox if we're really going to respond to this. Every skill, every capacity, whether they fund us or not, we have to take a responsibility to almost draw the line together. And that's the biggest challenge for us. And as bringing up, we're trying our best to navigate through this. And we just say simply, you know what, there's more than one life gone in that. All of those young men that was around that scene is gone. There was a tragedy where 14-year-olds on 2 attempted murders, shootings that have taken place. There are different things happening beyond us. So the mindset means, you know what, we're not interested in authority, we're not interested in nobody else, but moving to do what we need to do. And that is a challenge to break that consistency. So I'll put a full stop there, Nathan, and hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carver and Reverend Robin from Bringing Hope. You know what, it's really humbling and just amazing to hear all the thoughts that we've heard so far, and to have our participants with us, the 59 that are with us, and all the people listening to us on Facebook. Really, we just appreciate you being here, because it really does take the village. Like, let this moment be a mark in the sand for people to understand, because I think, especially within this sector, there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconceptions, but I'm very clear that it takes a village. And that's why when I had this thought to do this, I didn't just try and do it as Nathan and doing a Nathan and Sabrina show or First Class show. It was about tapping into the community, the village, and asking for different people from the village to share their thoughts and expertise and just their heart. The next person we're going to hear from, and after that, we're going to get ready for the panel discussion. I'm going to have to be very sensitive to how I manage the debate, just because of certain things that have happened on the screen and stuff while we've been live. So I'm going to have to use a lot of wisdom, but I hope that we can get through this. But thank you for everyone that's contributed so far and everyone that's with us. A young man who we've been working with, Trizzy, contacted me last night, and it says that he has a few things on his heart and thoughts that he wanted to share. So I'm going to try and get Trizzy to just share a few thoughts. You got about, say, 4 or 5 minutes, Trizzy. Is that cool? Just to share your thoughts, because you reached out to me and I said, you know what, you're a young man. I don't mind you coming to share.
I'm going to talk now. Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's all right. Now, to be totally honest with you, like, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but some of the stuff that I'm noticing, like with the sharing and the social media, I've noticed a lot of things that I've wanted to speak to about a long time. And some of the few things that I've been looking at is not the way how young people are sharing. It's more adults sharing these videos around. Now, we all have our say. We all know what we would have done if we was in that predicament. We probably would have said, you know what, that's someone's child, but at the same time, get out of the car, save that person. But some of the few things that I've been looking at is, are we sometimes partially to blame for some of these things, because we just share this thing like wildfire and we just gossip about it, and I don't really see so much people making any actions or movements to actually help some of these young people out on the road. Now, I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but I always try to look at it from what does the government, what does the police, what does the school, does it do enough to actually help protect these kids? I know a lot of these people will turn around and say that's the moms and the dads' job to actually look out for these kids, try control them, try keep them in their house, especially during lockdown. But I look at these things and I think, what else can a parent do? Because when you look at some of these moms and dads, you can tell that they're struggling for help. And some of the things that I've always looked at is, as a community, when you have like a play scheme or some sort of, you know, acting or music or it's a sort of facility where a child can go to and be himself. That helps a lot, but I don't see that anymore, because what I see is a lot of kids now initiating their own sort of thing on road with their peers and families just to do what they need to do. So it's just kind of sad just to see another young man getting stabbed out there because in his household, and I'm not trying to criticize him, I'm not trying to criticize nobody, he just probably feel like maybe being out on road with his people is something that he feel comfortable. Again, I'm not trying to disrespect why he's out on road or trying to make up any assumption. I'm just trying to say, this is a pandemic. I expected a lot of kids to be indoors. Now, I actually thought, when I saw this video, I was thinking like, yo, why are these kids doing what they're doing? Like, why they're not in the safety of their own doors? But I can't process the reason why a child would want to run out there, stab another youth. But then there's also a madness what goes around in this world, because the first thing comes to my head is, bang, is it really that hard out there for these kids nowadays to draw a knife? Don't they have some sort of, ambition or dream to follow? Like, don't they want to look at music or drama or chill with each other or whatever? And the more I sit down and look at these things, the more I think, like, am I talking nonsense? Because you think these kids got something to do anyway. And the more I talk, the more I don't make no sense. And the more I look at these things, I'm thinking, am I part of the cause who just don't look at these kids and want to help them? And I say, no, I'm doing my best to help. But, sorry, I don't want to go off topic. What I'm trying to basically say is, as an adult, and I'm raising my sons, I'm always looking at them to keep them creative and happy and bubbly. So I'm trying to make them avoid going out on road, itching up with other kids, trying to be one of these kids that want to roll around with a knife or try to hack like the hardest. But the truth of the matter is, they're not hacking like they're the hardest. They're hacking like one of the guys that basically, you know what? Sorry, I've just been rambling. It really does affect me knowing that this child.
You know what, Trizzy? Thank you so much for just sharing your thoughts. And you know me.
Yeah.
You reached out to me, so I said, you know what? I'll give you an opportunity just to share. So I hope people benefit and value what you've said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, man, and keep doing what you're doing. Yeah, with Panlight Theatre.
Yeah, I keep trying.
So we're gonna get ready for the panel discussion. I can see there's different conversations happening in the chat. Guys, I just apologize in advance. We're obviously not gonna get everyone's thoughts and feedback in, but we're gonna try our best with the time. We're doing good for time. I do want to finish by no later than 7:30, because I want to show respect and to my Muslim brothers who are fasting and need to break fast and get some food into their body. And I do not want my friend Craig or Tanaya to turn into the Incredible Hulk on me on this Zoom. We want to keep it all love and peace. So we're going to keep it timely. So I just want to get two reflections, and then we're going to literally open up the panel discussion. So I've asked Matthew if you could share just your thoughts, and also Tanaya Sam, I'm going to unmute you, sir, and both you can just tag there's a quick perspective on what you're hearing and your thoughts, and then we're going to do the panel discussion. Okay?
Right, can anyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, everyone can hear me, right. Hello to everyone that's in the chat. Like Nathan says, thanks for everyone being here to have the conversation. I'm going to start with kind of a backward statement, but I'm going to get to where I want to go, and that is, unfortunately, sometimes we're just going to lose them. Now, when I say that, people say, "Oh, but you can't say those things, because if you say that, then you're already going into the battle, and you're already defeated, because you're saying to yourself, you're losing anyway." That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, when it comes to this issue of youth violence, youth interaction, criminal behaviour, so on and so forth, we can decrease it and we can work to change it, but we can't eradicate something that is beyond our power regarding the systems that we live in. So when we look at how young people behave themselves and how they interact with themselves, then we have to also pay attention to the fact that in this world, there are both positive and negative influences. And with young people, for the most part, the negative influence is more desirable. And it's not what everyone wants to hear. It's not what everyone likes to hear, but the negative influence is more desirable. So I want to touch on a few things. Number one, when we look at young people, can we just remember that the majority of them are doing well? The majority of them are going to school, going to work, going to college, doing what they're doing, and they're making everyone proud.
Awesome.
And it's very easy to look at the state of young people when bad things happen and say, look at all of our kids. Look at all of our kids. They're all falling apart. What's the world coming to? The majority of our young people are doing amazing. And we have to give them props and give them encouragement, because one thing I've learned through working in social care, residential care, and through education is we spend a lot of time obviously paying attention to those doing poorly, and we don't give the relevant attention, enough attention to the children who are doing well. And then we wonder why sometimes the children who are doing well, they fall off and they become children who are doing negative things also, because they're looking for attention they can't get when they were doing all the right things. So let's pick up all of our young people who are doing amazing things and doing well. We have to celebrate them as well. Then when you look at certain behaviors and we're looking at young people, what do young people need probably more so than anyone, and even us? Structure. Right now, the world is upside down. And there is no structure for a lot of these young people, whether that be school, apprenticeships, college, university. They don't have the structure. The old saying says the devil makes work for idle hands. Listen, the devil makes work for idle children who don't have the know-how to really control themselves. A big part of my mantra is that we have to care for them even when they forget to care for themselves, because they don't know how to yet. They don't know what it is to look after themselves, to love life, to respect life and the sanctity of it and the sanctity of others. So we have to do it for them at times and really educate them on what's important. And so without the structure, we're looking at children who are at home in places where even before COVID, there was no structure. Even before COVID, there was no positive role model. There was no mom or dad or auntie or uncle or brother or sister who was doing amazing things to show them that they could be whatever they chose to be for whatever reason. So with COVID on top of that, we're looking at young people now who don't have structure and are probably watching a lot of adults panicking about what we're going to do, how we're going to get through this, how we're going to get through that. And they're kind of trying to find a way to get through this process themselves. And it's a big problem as well for young people who are looking for something, which a lot of young people are, because when they go looking for something in this world, for the most part, they're going to find something negative, because very rarely are we in a position where we can go out into the world and just see positivity everywhere. So when the children go looking for something, they're going to find something negative. When we live in certain areas and certain households and certain communities and environments, we're also more susceptible to becoming victims of certain behaviors. I very much doubt that if you had a collection of young people standing outside a chip shop up in, somewhere like Little Aston or the back of Sutton Coldfield, I doubt very much you're going to break into mass violence. It can happen, but I doubt very much it's going to happen in those kind of areas. So you've got to look at proximity as well when it comes to the violence and what these young people are seeing and what these young people are going through. In regards to going forward and stepping forward and seeing certain things, I think the biggest issue we have with young people in regards to what we're seeing right now is we as adults at times are not doing enough to challenge what they believe to be okay and to be normal behavior. You see, nothing's a problem if it's normal. And this is where we're getting a few things twisted and we're getting certain things wrong. We're asking ourselves, how do these children carry knives? How do these children interact with such violence? How do these children hang around with certain types of people? Listen, they find it normal. It's not like they're doing things that is crazy and they think that the behavior is very normal. And if they don't think the behavior is normal, they're working hard to normalize it. So when they do these things, it doesn't bother them as much as it might bother somebody else. The trauma for these young people still exists, but when you live through it so often, you find a way to suppress that trauma because you keep doing things, and it's not until you sit still and certain things happen. Like I said, you lose your friend, might go to jail for a long time, or they pass away, or they're killed, whatever reasons, when they sit down and they really think. My dad always told me that no one learns anything sometimes until they hit their rock bottom. Most of these children are nowhere near their bottom. So when it comes to how they do and how they get around certain things, we're struggling with them because we're not challenging what they believe to be normal. They're nowhere near their bottom. They're having a great time with their friends or people they call their friends that continually led astray. And there's no one there standing in their way saying, yo, big man, young lady, let's go over here, let's go right. We don't have to go left. So where I'm struggling with what I'm hearing in regards to when we go out into this panel is, I'm getting a bit annoyed with people saying, where are all the people doing all the work with these kids and why aren't they all outside and so on and so forth. We are outside and we're working hard, but we have to understand the battle and what we're battling against and the influences that we're battling against as well. I'm also not hearing enough sometimes, I'm guilty of it as a practitioner myself. I'm guilty of it, of not doing enough to say enough is enough. You know what I mean? Like we sit down and we say, this isn't okay, that isn't okay, we should do this. But sometimes we don't flat out just go out there on a limb, regardless of what people are willing to say to us, and just say, do you know what, enough is enough. And even I could have done a bit more in that situation.
Awesome. Matt, time.
Right, so I'm gonna wrap it up real quick. So when I say, unfortunately, we will lose them, when I say we'll lose them, work hard to understand what they believe to be normal and then change their mentality, or at least try to change their mentality. Because until we do that, until we get to the root cause of why they do what they do, regardless of how they think, then unfortunately, we're gonna lose them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew. Tanaya, Sam, any thoughts, please? And then we're going to, straight after you, go into the panel discussion. Clancy, if you're still with us, I know you had to go at a particular time. I'm going to see if we can just get some of your final thoughts as we start the panel. Would that be okay? Clancy, if you're still with us? I know you got meditation class in it. Yeah? Do you want me to bring you in now then? Tonight, is it all right for bringing Clancy just to say a few points? Thanks, Tanaya.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Sorry, I don't know what kind of gremlins are in the system at the moment, but they're there. Matthew, I just want to really, sound out all the ones that I did hear, but I came back on hearing Matthew's statements, which so much of what you're sharing, Matthew, is just so true, and that we don't celebrate the positives. Even in the youths that I have worked with that have the most challenging backgrounds, experiences, I can still find something positive within each of those. And I think when we really tap into the essence of them, of who they are, you will find that even the hardest of ones that I've worked with, if there was an alternative that they felt that they could turn to that was not going to have an impact on either their siblings or their family members or their family's family members, then they would. So I think also it's about if we do this work, we do it kind of knowing, or I do it kind of knowing exactly what you said, Matthew. I can't save them all. And the ones that I have the fortune to be able to influence, to make some behavior changes, even if they don't step outside of the arenas that they are in, then at least I have to hold the hope that in the fullness of time, somewhere along their life's journey, that intervention that I have had with them will make a difference. Awesome. And on that, you're right, I do have to go and host a meditation group, and just wanted to let people know I'm setting up a group for people who are recently bereaved. So please speak with Nathan to get my contact details, and you can be able to access that as well.
Clancy, before you go, if there was, just, I know you gotta go, but if there's 3 top things that you'd advise those who are listening who may be going through significant trauma right now, what would those top 3 things be?
Use your social media to be able to engage and connect with some of the organizations that are here.
Yeah.
This is the time to absolutely reach out. If you've never done it before, this is the perfect time for you to reach out. And awesome. You don't even have to say you need help. You just have to pick up the phone. And the awesome. Other people on the end of the phone in those organizations should be able to start that conversation with you. And the third thing is put the beating stick down. Stop being so hard on yourself and be compassionate to self.
Wow. Awesome. Clancy, love you loads. Thank you so much for your time.
Bless awesome. You, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you, Clancy.
Wow. What richness on this Zoom call. It's phenomenal. Humbled. Tanaya, sir, thoughts and just reflections as we prepare to go into a panel discussion and open up the floor for questions.
All right, thank you. In terms of thoughts, I went on to Birmingham Mail earlier on to just have a look at see what's what they're reporting on. And on the homepage, it said the first thing was thug threatens Morrison's staff with weapon after being rumbled using fake vouchers. Okay. Then it says man stabbed to death, warnings not to share the video. The next one was teenager dies from falling from a tower block. The next one was UK coronavirus death toll rises. And the next one was watch armed police in street as man barricades himself. Finally, boy 16 fighting for life after being stabbed, and a second one also injured. Now, the reason why I mention that is because that misery, we are compounded by media outlets. We're compounded with that. Our young people are compounded with that. I've looked on who's on the list here, and I've seen a lot of mature adults. It's adults. For young people, they can't make sense of a lot of that. But when they do go and listen, they stick the earphones in their ears, and they're listening to their tunes, their favorite songs. They're talking about juk, 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 stab, stab, stab. Now, many young people, they can get entertainment from it and not think anything more of it. But there are other young people, because of the trauma and the lives that which they're going through and seeing on a day-to-day, becomes a bit more real for them. Furthermore, they go onto social media and say, you know what, let me escape from that. And they go onto outlets such as Scarcity. I call out Scarcity. I'm calling out Made You Think. I'm calling out I'm Just Bait, who again reinforce the violence, okay, of different images that are going on the street. Then they say, you know what, let me go onto a computer game. The top 10 selling computer games from amongst that is 4 Call of Duties, Fallout, Fallout, Grand Theft Auto, all which involve violence. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because for young people, right, violence, as Matthew mentioned, is the norm. And these different things that they get involved in, behind it is corporate companies, and corporate companies are profiting off misery and pain, which the young people are investing in and embodying. So when we see young people going out there into the streets, these young people are trying to buy into something that we don't often think about, which is called the American dream. I bought into it when I was a roadman, a gang member, when I used to walk with a knife, when I used to walk with a gun 20 years ago. And it's still to this day, young people are brought into the American dream. The American dream is coming from wherever you're coming from, or whatever your social class is, you can make it successfully by any means necessary. By any means necessary means that you can get involved, if it's violence, if it's drugs, etc. And they have countless examples that they are being bombarded with day in, day out, of people that have made it through the American dream. The American dream, in essence, is capitalism. Capitalism is something that we don't tend to look at when we're talking about youth violence. But when you look at the backdrop of youth violence, capitalism is making money constantly. They are marketing themselves. The sports brands are marketing themselves as roadmen. The record companies are capitalism programs that are making money hand over fist. Okay, there is constant money being made, and we here don't have an infrastructure to battle that at this present moment in time. The county lines brought in 9 billion last year, 9 billion. The government gave 25 million to counter it. So we don't have an infrastructure, because we need to understand corporate companies, social media companies, YouTube, etc., are facilitating violence that young people are carrying out. So when we all leave now and we come off and we go back to our lives, young people are still going to be seeing this violence. Okay, the only way that I don't have all the answers, but in essence, for us to be able to really battle this is to start creating infrastructures. Young people want to make money. Them young people there that you're seeing driving around that are out, and you're thinking, why aren't they quarantined? Why aren't they in their yards? It's because they're trying to make money, because they've been told constantly that you need to have this, because we live in a consumerist society, and violence is a commodity. Okay, yeah. I can trade violence. So violence is a form of commodity, along with drugs, along with firearms, along with all the rest of it. We need to understand that our world that we live in is very different to their world, and they've got to navigate through that. And there's many young people that are walking around that are involved in the violence that actually don't want to be involved in the violence, but they do not see a way out. And we haven't set nothing in place for them to exit and then for them to be able to make money. And I just wanted to put another spin to what I'm hearing, because without a doubt, trauma plays its role, but money plays its role. And enough of these young people will stab somebody because it's to do with money related, or it's to do with raising up in the social pecking order, which again, the violence is a commodity.
So we're going to do tonight, I'm going to jump in and start the panel discussion, because I can feel the fire, bro. And knowing and seeing your presentations before, I just know there's so much, because you could touch on the globe local philosophy that you have.
Sorry to cut, yeah, but I can say it because I've worn the balaclava and I've been there involved in stuff, and I've been in jail, okay? And what was going on back then up to this point now, there's little pockets of great work being done, but overall we are not connecting. There's so many of us here are on this Zoom. How many of us are actually working together, truly working together? How many of us are truly working together? It's easy for us to look and say the video disturbed us. I understand that. The videos have been going on like that since 2005 when World Star Hip Hop first came about. In 2016, Shoki was murdered and it was caught on camera. In 2017, a Jamaican man was stabbed on Smethwick High Street and it was circulated.
So let me jump in, let me time in, because I don't want to run out of time and I want to respect the time that we're trying to do. Thank you tonight so much. Really appreciate what you're saying. I think you raised some very important points. Just to respond quickly to some of them. I know you've got a presentation. I've seen Craig do it. I do it in my Navigating the New Terrain presentation. I have 4 significant slides on this training. One of the slides is the shoebox picture of Puma, when Puma done and launched a trap party and done a shoebox with a trap phone in there and fake money and gave it out to inner city young people. The next slide is around having a picture of Mr. Tim Westwood, and I think the last research I've done on Tim Westwood, and someone like Tim Westwood, is worth something like £10 million. And then I have a next slide with Charlie Slough, and I think last time I done research on him, Charlie Slough, who was doing all the fire in the boots, is worth about £3.6 million. So there's a whole corporate monster that's happening, and a bigger problem that we have now with social media and this digital revolution is the money that people can make through doing YouTube videos, getting the views. We've got big brands like JD supporting, and I'm not hating on you artists if you was ever to hear this, but this is just the reality. Big corporate companies now are giving you guys a ton of money to promote their branding and products, and half of you haven't missed, you know what I'm saying? You're famous on social media, but really some of your thinking is not all there. Not all of you, but some of you, and you're promoting negativity still. So, and just responding quickly tonight on your point about us not working together, some of that is that the harsh reality is that some of us clash and not everyone gets on. But I think the bigger system problem is that the fact is that the commissioners and the commissioning structures and the funding is put in such a way that they offer what I will call peanuts and expecting us to work miracles. So what happens is that we're all applying for the same pots. The money doesn't really stretch. But what I think needs to happen is that a real proper resource is given, and we have the opportunity to develop consortiums and be able to really apply for resources that we need and put planning in. A lot of the stuff that I've seen happen in the West Midlands is reactional stuff. You're trying to say it's reactional stuff. And then, for instance, I'll give you a practical stuff and I'll pull it out here. There's some new funding that's being made available for something, and everyone can take notes of this, called the Youth Future Funds, no, the Youth Future Foundation, which is £90 million, which is given out, that is from dormant accounts, and now they're asking for organizations to apply for it. The criteria to apply for it is that you have to be an organization that has over 3 years set of accounts, you have to be turning over 100K, and also you've had to have had an independent evaluation. Now, for some of the grassroots organizations, you cancelled out of that already. You don't have 3 years set of accounts. You're not turning over £100,000, and you don't have an independent evaluation. So what happens is that this almost becomes a class system in terms of who gets funded and who doesn't get funded. So I just want you to put that in your mind to say that some of it is literally because of how the funding structures are set up, that it's actually getting us to compete against each other instead of working together. But I'm going to open up the floor now to have our panel discussion. So I'm going to welcome everyone back who's still here. So I think I've got Matthew, Carver, Craig, Tanayo still with us. I can see Richard's got a question.
Is it easy if you can direct the questions to specific people, or how do you want to do? Or you want to take a couple of questions and then throw it at people, because I can see this is going to get messy.
Craig, the truth is I don't know.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking? What you think to do?
I'm not saying like take 2 or 3 questions at once.
Okay.
And then throw them at a couple of people, because you know,
I'm going to respond quickly.
Between me, Carver, Robin, Tanaya, and Matthew, we all can chat. So
cool.
You might have to just delegate who's gonna.
And also we've got the former deputy from the PCC's office here. So we might time you in if there's any kind of policy questions, please. Because I know you still got the knowledge in your head, even though you're not necessarily in the role. Question. I think there's a question coming from Caddy. Did you have a question? I seen your hand raising up from time. 1 second. So I'm going to go to Caddy. I think Richard, I seen your hand. So I'm going to try and take these 2 questions first. Go.
Okay. Hey everyone. Hey Nathan. First of all, yeah, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet because I'm going through my own stuff. But shout out to everyone, because we've been in this for a minute now. This has been over a decade. We've been having the same conversations. About first it was gun crime, now it's over to knife crime. So I got a few points, and one of you can probably start to answer. Because first of all, it's to do with this funding. The government has set things up, so we have to rely on them for funding. So anytime they take the funding away from us, it's like everything collapses. So we need to have some kind of infrastructure that's together, so we're not relying on government funding all the time. I know that's hard, but it's like they're the puppet masters. So as soon as the youth clubs close down, or as soon as XY happens, it's like they're controlling us right now. And so that is one thing that I keep, we've had these conversations years after years about the same thing, and it's frustrating, and we're losing so many people along the way. So excuse my passion, you know what I mean? That's the first thing I want to bring up. The second thing,
I'm going to give you 2, Caddy, just because there's so much of us here. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. The second thing is, when I'm working with young people in the community, especially with the school that we work at, Nathan, one of the young men said to me specifically, Caddy, how comes you guys put so much energy and effort into the kids that are doing wrong, doing negativity, but I'm trying to do my best, stay above the clouds, but I'm not having a much effort and much impact put into me. I want to be an engineer. However, I'm not getting that same support and that same love from the community, which means that a lot of us, and I mean a lot of us, we put so much energy into looking at the negative, with forgetting about the positive young people out there trying to make it, trying to stay above that benchmark, trying to do positive things. But we keep always focusing and putting so much effort in the negative, we're missing out a whole group of young people that are, like you said, suffering from that trauma anyway. So those were the 2 points where anyone can jump in and kind of say what they need to say.
Thank you, Caddy. Love you loads.
Love you loads, Nate.
And good work on the stuff with the hospital and your article recently.
Don't get me started. Right,
our condolences as well to you.
Appreciated, man. Appreciated. So anyone can answer whatever they need to answer, but those were the 2 points I really wanted to make.
So wait, before we respond back to Caddy, I'm going to get one from Richard, and I was going to read out some of the questions we've got from Facebook, and then you can respond. Is that all right, panel? Yeah.
But how are you doing it? So we're making sure that we're all answering each one.
Okay.
Might as well just respond to Caddy's real quick.
Okay. I've got about 5 questions on my phone from Facebook.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what are we? That's what I'm saying. Are you throwing out the questions?
Yeah.
Or are we ignoring Caddy because? Are you doing it? You look puzzled there, bro.
I'm not sure, bro. You're just making me confused. Sorry, Sabrina, you're confusing me. Sorry.
Can we answer Caddy? Can we answer Caddy?
Short and sweet with Caddy's one. From my
right, then go on, and Caddy's one. Go on, and go.
I think that is kind of the issue that a lot of us face. You know, many of us, I know, even from the panelists, we do so much more than what we called for. But unfortunately, when there's a so-called epidemic that takes place in a particular community or particular region, what they want is experts, and you've also got to look at what the current policies are in schools. So you look at the latest Ofsted reports. Remember, over the last 10 years, they've failed quite severely around raising awareness around things like extremism, county lines, sexual exploitation, domestic violence. And because knife crime and gun crime is on the rise, they have to be seen to be ticking that box as well. So like with any school, what they're going to be doing is calling for those that they believe or perceive are some of the giants around the country that are able to do that. But the reality is, obviously, we're going to put our hand up and say we're able to engage with that. But when you kind of look at some of the secondary work that we do, it's a lot more. You know, many of us are doing stuff like entrepreneurship. A lot of us do stuff around business. A lot of us do stuff around the arts and creativity. But unfortunately, because knife and gun crime tends to be something that is in the atmosphere 24/7, it seems like that's the only thing that we do. And even when I talk about the stuff that the work that I do, you know, knife and gun crime and gangs is a very small percentage. It just so happens that on Facebook and Instagram, those are the things that people want to hear. But on a day-to-day, I'm doing stuff around peer mentoring. On a day-to-day stuff, I'm doing stuff around entrepreneurship. But unfortunately, that's not the flavor of the month. And I think one of the things that we possibly can do collectively is use each other to promote some of those positive things that we're doing as well. And I think that goes back to Matthew's point as well. So then those same young people that you're talking about don't have that perception, because you also got to bear in mind that perceptions coming from multiple different places. I had this conversation with Tanaya before. You may have seen a post he done a few months back where we showed a whole massive building of free activities, but yet parents in that same community will say there's nothing for the youths them on road. So it's also about perception. It's also about us having the willingness and the collectivity to connect with each other and say, listen, this is what's going on. And I think the last point I'll just make is that you also got to bear in mind, there's not many of us soldiers on the ground. So remember, we're under the microscope, but there's not many of us. And we're facing films, games, and all of the things that Tanaya and Nat's just mentioned. So our challenge is like almost like we become like the last superheroes in Endgame for real, because we're the only ones that are seen to be out there. And there's also some other people as well that are unsung heroes as well. I always have to shout them out as well, because they're probably not social media entities like us, but on the ground doing stuff with parents. And that's why I'm glad that you've brought people like, you know, Darren in, you've brought people like in Clancy, because Clancy, for me, lifesaver, true therapist in our community, but we don't know that these things exist. So it's also about promoting those things as well. But unfortunately, our focus is always on the knee-jerk reaction, which is the violent.
Thank you, Craig. Awesome. A question for Matthew. As practitioners, should we diversify or have a stronger link into children's work, and should we go upstream? A question for you.
Simple answer, yes.
Right.
Not being funny, but not being funny. Like, I'll make a quick comparison. You know, if you're say for example, you know, I know trainers. If you know me, you know, me and Craig kind of go back and forth sometimes. I'm a trainer and I love them. Now, my wardrobe.
Someone's got loud noise in the background. Sorry.
I know something.
I just love supreme color.
Think Darren's? No.
Somebody got a TV.
Someone's got the TV on.
He was guilty.
Don't have to tell him, man. Television.
Right, so
I'm sorry, Matthew.
So in my collection of trainers, I got Nike, Adidas, Reebok, they're everywhere. You can't call yourself a true trainer, collector, and a fan if you don't have a variety. Now, my thing is this: if you're going to be a youth worker and you want to work with young people, you're telling me that the only youth work you're going to know how to do is one thing. I'm good at talking. I'm good at playing games. I'm good at mentoring. I'm good at one-to-one sessions. No, I say it so many times, and I'm going to keep saying it. Youth work is a vocation. Like being a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, or any of those things, youth work is a vocation. To be good at your job, you must upskill yourself consistently and on multiple different platforms and environments. Now, I'm not saying that every youth worker has to be multifaceted to the nines, What I am saying is that if you have a specialist gift in your youth work, then that's good. That's something that people can look to you and say, you know what, he is good or she is good at this. But that doesn't mean because you've got a specialist in one thing and you're good at one or two different things, that you don't then go and teach yourself or upskill yourself or go to people who know better than you and say, teach me, let me observe. Because one thing I found in this work with young people is, for some reason, we like to pretend as adults in this work, sometimes like we know everything, like we've got all the answers. And the reality is, I know I learn a lot from loads of different people, and I continue to try to upskill myself because the world keeps changing. The people in the world change with it. Environments are different, cultures are different. We're not all one thing. We're not all one entity. We are multiple people with unique, and we're multifaceted. So should youth work diversify? Yes. Should we go upstream? Yes. Should we continue to equip ourselves with the knowledge and understanding of different people understanding? Yes. Because if we don't do that, then we're failing, and we're not only failing ourselves, but we're failing the people we engage. Because what we're saying to ourselves, what we're saying to ourselves is, I know enough to get where I need to go. But the reality is, that's a mixed message, because we're supposed to be telling our children that life is a continuing learning process, and you can learn from everyone and go where you need to go. So my simple answer is yes. We have to upskill, we have to keep learning, we have to keep applying what we learn to life, teach other people what we learn and share information, like the village approach, and move forward with our work, because until we do those things and respect what we're doing with young people, we're not doing enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthew. 1 second, because I just need to give some housekeeping. So I've got questions, guys, just so you understand what's happening. I've got questions flying through my WhatsApp. I've got questions flying through Facebook, and I've got text messages coming in, and I've got some of the team giving me directions. So what I'm saying is that based on my ambition was to try and finish this by 7:30. I might can go up to 1:45.
15 minutes is fine.
Yeah. But I just need to say that just keep responses as short as possible. So there's a few more questions I want to ask. There's a question for Carver, and it says, how do we build resilience in our young people if we can't change the corporate violence?
Okay, can I just say that Claire from the VRU is listening at the moment, and she can't get in, so she's watching via Facebook, and she just lost her brother, so she's on her way to sort out a funeral for him, but she's listening regarding the corporate response to this issue. I think Tanaya highlighted something very clearly about the unity in this. Look around the table, so to speak, the Zoom table. We have men and women. Can I just note that there are not many women at this point around the table? That's just an observation, because women who are involved on the streets, on the ground, need to contribute to this. So what do we do then in terms of the corporate response? This has to be interdisciplinary. We have criminologists, we have lawyers, we have people who are medical. Now, we've never really come together around this issue together. Now, this is a chat room at the moment. This is a conference. And I believe that if Claire, you are listening, Claire, the violence reduction unit, which is set up now, need to take account of what is being said here, because the government is saying that they want these responses to be sustained, but they give us literally momentary funding. The Glasgow model for the violence reduction unit collectively said this is a 10-year strategy. You can't expect the change to happen overnight for a lifestyle that has been entrenched for years. That's been a lifestyle. So I believe that there has to be a collective response here, but it has to be informed by evidence-based practice. It has to be informed by the academic. It has to be informed by the ground. It has to be informed by the medical. It has to be informed holistically, because then once we start swelling this information and the people who have desisted, I like what Tanaya said, who's desisted, we need another 20, 30, 40 of Tanayas to be a part of this pressure group, if you please. So that's what I want to say in terms of a response to this, because I think we can do it. However, I think we have to come together more in critical conversationing.
Thank you, Carver. What I'm going to do, because I'm just so conscious that time is going to go, and maybe for those who have extra time can go through the Facebook video and just try and answer the questions by writing direct responses. Is that, can I ask the panel member, Richard, you didn't ask your question, did you? You want to ask it? You want to ask your question?
Yeah, if I may.
Yes,
Thank you. First of all, evening everybody. Thank you again, Nathan, for putting this together. Very quickly, I just wanted to raise just a few things really. And the first thing for me, and people have obviously touched on it already, was that for years and years, I remember going to a meeting back when I was, 26, so you're talking about 20 years ago plus. And for me, I'm hearing some of the same, and it's not to knock anybody, but some of the same barriers as was when I sat in the room 20 years ago. And one of the biggest barriers, again, is about us coming together. Standard, it's about us coming together, it's about us being able to unite. What can we do to actually make that more practical, as opposed to it just being another talking moment? Because I think that's the first thing. Now, I know that everybody's got to eat, and obviously, Nathan, you really mentioned it earlier on in terms of that's what kind of keeps us separated sometimes, and obviously those who hold the purse strings can obviously dictate that to some degree. And I think we need to at some point say, and for me, I just said to myself, what if we just said, well, what if every practitioner just said, I can give up a couple of days free just to do something, and make it around preventative work as well? Because I think a lot of the stuff that we do is very reactionary. So for me, I just thought, what can Richard Daly do for free to work with children who are at primary age group as well? Because I think a lot of the stuff that we do is very reactionary, and I think we need to start to kind of change the culture and change the atmosphere. And I think you change the atmosphere and you plant seeds in certain ground when the atmosphere is right. We all know the saying, bend the tree when it's young. So I think we have to do a lot of that earlier work when the young people are younger. Yes, we still need to connect the dots and work with the parents. We still need to be working with the young people now who are obviously involved in some of the stuff that we've seen. But I think it's going back to the Glasgow model, it's a 10, 15, 20 year strategy. So therefore, what are we doing preventatively with the younger ones now, with the 5, 6 and 7 year olds? Carver mentioned ACEs. I'm doing some work around that in relation to one of the schools that I'm working with now. You got to start younger. You have to start younger. And I just think that we do a lot of stuff now because the system knows that we need to eat.
Got 8 seconds left, Richard.
I'm going to feed you now. And because we need to eat, the money gets thrown in terms of what's important now, as Craig said. But if we can
5 seconds left, Richard.
Free, what can I do for free? The younger ones, I think that's what we would change the culture. Change the culture, brother.
Love you, Richard, but you're gone. Thanks, Richard. Valuable points. Really appreciate that. What I'm going to ask everyone to do, panel members, is to just give, based on what they're hearing, and almost like Jerry Springer, final thoughts as we're wrapping up, because we need to come to a close. And I'll just say something, but I'm committed. I don't need to. Sometimes I think like I don't even have to prove my commitment. Like we're here. Anyone from the panel in any order, can you just give your final thoughts and respond to anything that you've heard so far?
Nathan, it's 7:20. He says he was going to end at 1:45. I think you could answer a couple more questions.
Yeah. Let's address that one first in terms of Richards, because you said 1:45, so we got 20. So
are you going to do 1:45 then?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay. Are you agreeing? Okay, cool. Say no more.
Cool. Now, I was saying to Richard's point, nurseries, Liz, I don't know if you know Liz Pemberton, she's always promoted on her social media for men to come in and do stuff with their children. I volunteer at a nursery every year. At the same time, every year, a couple of weeks before the kids graduate, just to kind of have some, male energy into the building, because they're always, throughout the year, always predominantly around women. So I think that's a particular way. And I think it links to Carver's point and some of the stuff that Tanaya spoke about as well. I know we was talking about the Glasgow model. Let's go back a little bit and look at the Chicago model, because I believe the Chicago model reflects more of what we're going through in the UK. I think from a demographic perspective, and also the mindset and the culture that embody some of the issues that we're talking about as well. And I think that some of those processes agreed didn't take 5 years, 10 years, you know, to get a complete societal change. It takes time. And I think the methodology, just to kind of summarize in which what Chicago took, was it was community-led, academically driven. So that means that people need to be upskilled, which was the point that Matthew attempted to speak about as well earlier. So it means that those that are from the VRU, the PCC, the methodology is that you don't only use one particular type of person. And there was the report that we wrote last year from the NYA that said over the last 10 years, what the government has done and all organizations that seek to fund the issue have only focused on individuals that have lived experience. And that's excellent. But then what about the youth workers? Because people are talking about what youth work is. Youth work is an art, it's a science, it's a philosophy where we use multi-models to engage with particular children and young people and their families. But because the mindset has always been ex-roadman, ex-criminal, ex-convict, ex-drug dealer, ex-addict, and that mindset of understanding what youth work is, what it's done is because the blurred line. So what I'm saying is it needs to work in conjunction and hand to hand, and that's the collective on only one aspect of the model. You got those that are in the room that do stuff around entrepreneurship. It's about connecting those dots. There's people in the room that are very interested in that. And I think Matthew said the point of staying in your lane. And when you stay in your lane and know your lane, you then just work alongside those that do. And for me personally, when we always talk about this idea about unity and it takes a village to raise a child, this is where sometimes me and Nathan always differ, because there's a lot of people in the village that will kill our picnic and our children, and I don't want them near my kids. So I think we need to also have conversations about individuals that are domestically violent, that also project in the community that there's something else. There's pedophiles in our community that we don't talk about. There's loads of issues that we never talk about in the community, but yet people are saying, we need to unite. And working with a lot of women that are going through a lot of issues at their home, with a number of people within our community. I think sometimes when we kind of use this kind of voyeuristic perspective of we need to all just work together in the community, now it doesn't work like that, because I don't want my children or family members or my brothers or friends' kids around individuals that's going to indoctrinate them with the madness that we're talking about.
Yeah, Skip. I second what Craig says. I think we just have to just deal with it head on in it. To work together, we've got to be willing to be vulnerable to each other. And that's a process. Yeah. Secondly, if there's going to be a collective response, we have to plan and plan well, because there's many different skill bases, but there has to be coordination, because this thing here, it's like a military model, you know. It may look loose, it may look sporadic, but there's order in the chaos sometimes. It's a bit like this corona thing. It may be chaotic, but there's order. So it's about how, looking on who's in this talk and discussion today, the reals of really having the behind the scene conversation to try and form, because as Craig said, I know anybody me I work with, straight with that, straight. Why? Because we have to protect each other. You get what I'm saying? You know, so we just have to be real, work with what we can work with. And I've noticed in the chat, Nathan, there's a lot of people talking about self-financing, self-governance. And I think that's one area that if we could remember what our grandparents brought, you know, the partner system. And if all of us could put a little muckle in the bucket, we could go a long way beyond what the short term is, because that's part of it as well. But the biggest thing when it comes to money is trust. So there's not doom and gloom, because we've made a lot of progress, but it's about how we can build on what we've learned. And that's going to take, you know, like-minded individuals from every background, from bad man to liar, from doctor to whoever, teacher. We've got all what we need in here, but it's how we come together.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Any other thoughts from our panel members, please? Thank you.
Here's a quick one, really, in regards to the way that we work and how we work. for 8 years.
Speak up a little bit, Matthew. I'm struggling to hear you. Sorry.
For 8 years, I ran a football team, and I was like every single weekend. I never got paid a penny. And we ran up and down every weekend, and sometimes we lost money. And you know what? I think everyone on this panel who's been doing this work for a long time can put their hand up and say they've lost money doing the work. They've put their money in other children's bellies, other people's children's bellies, and they've given them all over the place. But I'll tell you something, when we look at what we can do for our communities in regards to how we work and how we can be of use, I agree that everyone's got to pay their bills. I agree that sometimes the world keeps asking things of us that they won't do, but they expect us to do for nothing. But there are so many ways, on top of what Craig's already said in regards to how he volunteers at the nursery, there are so many ways that you can go outside and be involved in your communities in some way, shape or form, where, yeah, there's no money attached to it. And yeah, you might feel like whatever you're doing is little and none. But I promise you this, if you go out into the world and you do 1 hour a week and you volunteer in an organization, and if you need help looking for an organization, and there are people like us on the panel, I'm sure everyone on this panel can direct you to somewhere where you can go and volunteer sometime. If you can save one child, and it's cliche as it sounds, just one, with your 1 hour a week, your 1 hour a week is worth more than its weight in gold. And it always will be, because some of the best experiences I've had in youth work and some of the biggest changes I've made in youth work have been out of my pocket, not being paid, and having a great time doing it and watching them children grow and bless the world. And then wherever I teach them, they go and bless other children with those lessons. And once again, I never got paid a penny. So it comes down to what you want and how really you want to get it done and how you want the work to be delivered. Because I think sometimes, once again, even us as practitioners who do the work, sometimes we make excuses and we say, oh, you know what, we can't do this because it's probably because we're tired. We don't want to, we've had enough, we're frustrated, we've lost the will, we've lost the love, we've lost something isn't right. But there's always more we can do, even when we're not getting the money for it. And if you are getting the money for it, then spend it wisely, because when it's gone, it's gone. And the young people deserve our work and our fruits, and it needs to come back tenfold.
Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else?
Nathan, I can hear a lot of, the vocal words from those in education, academia, lived experiences, but I'm going to go back to business, because when you're talking about, I know there's a load of young people who are affected, and young people are affected in various ways. But the reason why this call came about is because we saw an act of violence, somebody being stabbed, somebody being murdered, and the violent individuals are the ones that create the biggest concern. And when you look in the backdrop of the violence, finances plays a key role. Finance plays a key role. So in terms of this Zoom and this conversation, where are those within our community that are into the finance and the business world? I'm not talking just the little bits, because we have within our community people making real money with real businesses, and that needs to be explored at in a greater way, in how other people can grow their businesses and how young people can get into legitimate work, because we don't take value in our people working, and voluntary work should take place 100%. But even in terms of when I go back to Caddy's question, Caddy mentioned about the funding from the government. If us as smaller community organizations came together as a conglomerate and had the correct infrastructure, then you can apply for the right funding. But because of the infrastructure is not in place, you can't go for certain funding, and that goes down to business. Okay. And so in terms of infrastructure to be able to support young people, when young people are coming out of prison, what infrastructure within the community is set in place to support them away from going back to the trap house? There ain't nothing. Academia's amazing in terms of education, research, lived experience. Yeah, I can talk from that lived bit, the youth work, etc. But again, and we all play our part, but there's a missing piece of the jigsaw, which is business and finance. And as a community, we've got to get hold of it. The only people we're dealing with that's visible with finance is drug dealers, rappers, sports individuals, but there's other players. and they need to be involved in the conversation, and they need to be more visible.
True.
True.
True. Any other thoughts, please? Got literally 15 minutes. What do you say? Sorry.
I throw another question because we've stayed on this one for a little while now.
Okay.
You said you had 5 from here. What about the Facebook ones and the text messages?
Okay, so I think I got a question from, let me just see. Leon, did you have a question? I got a message that you got a question. 1 second, let me unmute you. I can't hear you, sir. Leon, did you have a question, bro?
All right then. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Just quickly, 2 points. This is great that we've got everybody round the table. But 2 things I'm hearing now. Everyone's talking about partnership work. Yeah, we do need to do partnership work, but I think certain people need to be vetted. People who are on the front line, who are actually really making a difference, really working with the youths that are hard to reach. And not just the hard to reach youths. What about the youths that are doing a lot of positive stuff? February just gone, I worked with over 30 volunteers that made a difference in their community, working with young people who were in schools, young people who have been excluded from schools, kids who just wanted to have friends. And these were their own peers. So it was peer-led. And what I'm trying to get around is, we're talking about, yeah, we want to do all these changes. We need to include the young people. The young people need to have their voice as well. We need to do this, and we need to have some young people and let them have their voice as well, because everything we're doing is affecting the young people. Now, we spoke about the money as well. Young people aren't going to come off, those that are committing crimes, those that are in the criminal justice system, aren't going to come off road unless you give them an opportunity. You have to give them something. There has to be some form of incentive, whether it be courses, whether it be training, or whether it be like the MAD project. What we do is we have a scheme. So you start from participant, volunteer, and then you become a sessional worker. When you're a sessional worker, you get paid. You get paid. And I think that's what we've got to do. All young people love money. We know where all the young people are. We need to really make a difference. And one last thing, I've been here for 20 years. I've been doing this for 20 years with Matthew, with Nathan, with Craig. I've run a football team, put money out of my own pocket, and it was only £2 per youth. The youths, they ain't got it. We have to show the youths that we care and that we are really here. And there's a lot of people talking, there's a lot of people saying, let's start seeing action. What are you doing after here? What are you doing later? What are you doing tomorrow? Who are you engaging with? And also big up to Naya as well. Carver, Misil, Robin, Misil, and well done to everyone doing the work. But we need to do more of this and not just wait for something to happen. Like Craig was saying, it's always a reaction. Yeah, let's make some positive change in our community, because some people, I live in the hood. I live where all the young people are. I see what's going on, and I see what's happening to all the young people. Was you saying, Skips? Was you saying that?
Yeah, I was saying at the time that was like powerful points that you're saying, bro. From 2005, bro, we've been walking.
But one thing we've got to come with love as well. We're just going to come with love as well. And with young people, sorry, it's like a glass of water in it. You can give them the glass of water, but you can't force them to drink it. But you've got to give them the opportunity.
And if you got Vimto, you give them some Vimto. If you got Ribena, give them a Ribena. If you got peppermint tea, give them a peppermint tea.
Okay, then, Mr. I know you're getting ready to break.
So what about Cersei?
All right, let's not go too much.
Ambush tea.
Some of my brothers are gonna break their fast in a bit.
Now you got 10 minutes, man. Ask the next question. Come
on. Nathan, do about 3 or 4 questions at once.
Yeah, no,
I can.
Forget
yes.
Just ask 3 questions at once instead of just one by one. And then delegate questions to
team who are listening. Is there any people on Facebook that are asking questions, please? David has a question. David, where are you?
Just read the question as opposed to, if you can. It might be quicker that way.
Question, please, David.
Thank you. Great listening to everyone and some great points. One of the things I want to ask, what's the likelihood and chances of getting a consortium put together? So when Tanai mentioned about that infrastructure, Craig mentioned about everyone's mentioned working together. So what, like realistically, how can we get a consortium together of everyone here who is a practitioner of coming together and start putting things in process so we can be more organized, we can do things more consistently and more effectively. And it's not just a quick fix scenario, but it's something that's going to be a lasting legacy. So something that can be built upon and can grow over time. So that's my question, is realistically getting something put together so we can build on having something of our own that we don't really necessarily have to be looking at other organizations, but as a community and as a city, we've started something and we can build on it.
Thank you, sir. Another question to add is, what type of things do you recommend people to do when they're not an organization but still want to help? So we're going to take those two questions now, and then we're going to wrap up, literally. So what David said, and
the first class legacy would have answered that question, and then bring in hope in terms of consortiums. And then we can just chip in from that end.
Okay. Nathan?
Yes, sir.
The second one for you, Nathan. What type of thing can a person do who's not an organization?
I think the easy answer to that is volunteering. It's volunteering, and then if an opportunity opens up, then work. That's my quick answer to that, is volunteer to some of these organizations that are on this call. There's about 5 organizations, 6 organizations. And then as and when opportunities can come about, then you may be able to get paid work. But what I've realized that if I compare when I started the original version of First Class Youth Network in 2005, and if you remember coming to the struggle debate forums at South Birmingham College, and nowadays I find that finding volunteers is hard. Like, everyone's got real bills and everyone is looking something. And even when I'm trying to give people something, people are looking at me like, is this all you're going to pay me? Or is this all you got? And people, I think that sometimes we don't understand that when you're dealing with an organization, there's things called overheads and running costs and office space and paperwork and paying bills and stuff like that. And then yourself as an individual need to be able to pay and to pay yourself and be able to work. So I just think sometimes in our community, there's unrealistic expectations. It's just like, I've just finished my term at my local church as a trustee member, and many people will always have the church up in their heart and talk about why the church always just want offering and tithes. But sitting on that board, one of the things I realized is that how many things a church has to pay for. Someone has to clean it, the water fountain, the water bill, the electric bill, the gas bill, the cleaning, the car park, the gardening needs to get done. All these building stuff that needs to happen. Then the staff salaries of just the administrator, all these things. And when you start to see the list on the spreadsheet, you think to yourself, wow. But some people would say, oh, I don't want this type, but nah, like our church building can be, without disclosing the amount, but it's in the hundreds, a serious amount of money to run a big building just on an electric bill perspective. And I just think that the community just think that this money is some miracle money and that it just has this everlasting life, and the harsh reality is it doesn't. Would you like to answer bringing up around consortium?
Yeah, I think I saw Carl's hand as well. So respect Carl as well, because I know he's raised his hand a couple of times. I think simply it can be done. We just have to be willing to have the conversations to start to build. I think there's enough skill. I think Tanaya raised the point around that there are loads of real business people amongst us who are running businesses, from self-employed up to multi-million companies that exist within the community. So it's going to be about coordination. It's going to be about real talk. It's going to be about saying, going back to Craig's point, who in the village will burn it down, although them is part of the village. So you're going to need every element. The move forward, going back to David's point, is if people are willing to be involved in that discussion. Some of us have attempted that. I ain't going to go into that, who are here now. We got to have that conversation. But I don't want it to be a reaction just to the epidemic. It's got to be a reaction that's holistic. Going back to Tanaya's point of whether a person is coming out of prison or coming out of lockdown, whatever it is, we're in a different place now. And there's going to be opportunities, but we have to plan and we have to get serious with it. Carver?
Can I just say, the head of the violence reduction unit is still listening, what would we want to say to her? Because she's offering to meet as a consortium. Now, consortiums, David, take time to strategize. You need structure around this. This ain't no quick fix, just putting people together. It doesn't work, because there's certain things about strategy, about bringing key people, key players together, which if you don't work it, and if you don't discuss, and if you don't have, you have to have critical conversation, and we have to be vulnerable before each other, so to speak. And that isn't easy. So the violence reduction unit now, which is just coming online, what do we want to say to them?
I got a definitely strong, clear message for the VRU and other organizations like that, Carver. I think that one of the things that needs to happen is that the first and foremost for every voluntary or grassroots organization is that we have to be valued and respected. Like I heard a lot of people's points around volunteering and stuff like that. Like I will put it out there, this is live on Facebook and whatever. I've been here since 2005, guys, like over 15 years doing the same type of work. Like we have to be working with each other to upskill each other and get us off being frontline. Like I don't have no joy. The times when I go out and I have to do outreach myself, it's like for me, I've failed as an organization because I should be a management thing and overseeing, and we've got to encourage each other to like change position. We shouldn't always be thinking it needs to be us on the grassroots. So we need to be valued. We need to be resourced adequately. Also, what I think needs to happen is that we need to be able to resource the planning and strategy time, because every time I go to a meeting, so when the PCC was really active, I'm always trying to articulate in these meetings, for every time I come to a conference, a whole day seminar, or go to an away day, like my time is not being covered for this. Is that making sense? And people sometimes don't value that, like the understanding that if we're gonna come around the table and we're gonna plan, we need budget in place for the development time. And we shouldn't feel shy or afraid for putting our real, costings in, full cost recovery. And I think what needs to happen, me personally, I think there needs to be more scrutiny of the organizations that do get the money, because one of the things that frustrates the life out of me, especially around the things around the VRU, is that the VRU obviously had certain amount of money that they needed to spend in a certain amount of time. And what happened was that we as an organization got calls from those organizations to say, oh, can you come and help us deliver? And one of the things I'm sick of is, hypothetically, out of every £1,000 that is being given, you want to come to an organization like me and say, oh, here's £50 out of the £1,000. Can you do all of this work? It's not on. We're not stupid. We understand what it costs. And I just think that we just need to be really valued and given the right space and time to do the development and the strategy.
And I think, Nathan, just to add on to your point just before I leave, is that's what the public health approach that me and Carver have been talking about, and many of us in the community are talking about. It needs to be community-led and academically driven. What it can't be is that there's a secret series of meetings that takes place, and then we, as experts and key stakeholders in the community, get parachuted in once the decisions have already been made. And many of us in this room share that temperament. When there's an underspend, then we want you to deliver this, then we want you to do that, and we're not getting paid according to what our expertise ultimately are. Or there's this idea of some other experts that are not in our region, not on the ground, none of us know, are being used to get data to be able to provide information about the young people that we see every day. So then when there's new initiatives then get rolled out and they don't work in terms of certain types of settings, and I'm not going to go to the conversation that we've had before, and then that phone call of, Craig, can you talk to a young person that we can't talk to and that's been funded over 200,000 in order to do that, but then you want to give us £50 in order to do that. So like Tanaya said, again, I'm reiterating the point, we have to talk finances and we have to talk money. And I think just to the point that David made earlier, I think the one thing that I wanted to add on when we're talking about consortium is that we also need to understand people's ethos. I get emails every day from people that are not on my mission, but want me to jump onto their mission because they have a brilliant idea, which is cool, but that's not my mission. So what we also need to do is sit down and be honest and say, you know what, I'm good at talking, so I can deliver training, but I'm not what Carver does. I'm not what Tanaya does. And then it's having those conversations and saying, okay, this is what the infrastructure is. So then if we're then applying for that big amount of funding, we can delegate accordingly. Problem is that everybody's trying to do everything. And then these entities pick us off against each other. And then this is when the problems happen. And that's a historic conversation. And it's something that we're seeing now and we can learn from history.
I jump in a second.
Yeah, you're going to be the last point because I do want to wrap up now.
That's fine. So in regards to all of this, one thing that we have touched on it, but in regards to coming together and doing work together, in regards to the work being done and speaking to these big organizations and government groups, is that it's one of my favorite sayings: seek first to understand before being understood. So we are out here looking at the children and the young people saying, this is what we're going to do for them. And Leon said it as well, but no one has gone to those young people and said, what do you think you need? How do you think we can be of best service? Because even if we came together with all the best ideas in the world, if the young people don't care about what we have to offer, we're still useless. We're not relevant. And a big part of youth work is relevancy. If you're not relevant, go home. Because young people, they might be younger than you, they might not have lived as long as you, but they have a great way of sussing you out, chewing you up and spitting you out. Because you don't give them what they're looking for. They're looking for their own version of what is substance. Yeah. We might find it in a book, a documentary, faith, whatever it may be. They're looking for their version of substance. And if we're not relevant to those young people, then we're no good to them. We're useless. And I think we have to seek to understand the young people that we want to engage before we all come together and say, right, we're all quite clever. We've all done the work for 15, 20, 25 years. We've got a great idea about what we believe young people need. And then we throw out all these ideas, but they're no longer relevant to today's children. Nathan, I remember first back in the day in South Birmingham and the Drum and all them shows. Do you think you could deliver what you did in 2005 and 2020 and you'd be successful? No, it's not going to happen because the times continue to change, so do the young people. So unless we truly work out who these young people are that we're trying to be of service to, the consortium won't work.
Awesome.
All the finances in the world won't do the job. I'm finishing. All the finances in the world won't do the job.
30 seconds, bro.
But what I'm saying is understand the young people that we're trying to be of service to. And once we've done that and we cracked that, then we can work out how we get together and make it work for them.
Awesome. Yeah. I just want to say thank you, Matthew. Thank you, every single person that's still watching us and has stayed with us for the time. This was just an idea in the morning. I was just moved by the video and I seen that enough was enough. To all the panelists, all the speakers, thank you. Love you all, and I really appreciate you. It's humbling just to know that, you know what, just a thought, when it seems impossible, at 8 o'clock in this morning, and I had this thought, who would have thought we could have done this, but we've done it. And I'm committed to continue to help bring people together and let this work. Just for you, announcements is just to say that this has been recorded and that we will share this, save it and share it. I think it's on Facebook. It's my first time doing it on Facebook, so hopefully it will just stay on there. Not completely sure.
On Facebook.
Pardon?
Put it on YouTube if you can, because a lot of people don't use Facebook no more.
Okay, no problem. We'll do that. You like yourself. You've been a stranger, you've been a ghost on there. Just to say that this Wednesday, we're hosting an event through our Kitchen Table Talks platform to help families deal with grief and trauma during this very difficult time of COVID-19. And also on Thursday, which is my birthday, I am going to be interviewing Dr. Justin Varley from Public Health, Birmingham City Council, to have a real conversation and try and understand on behalf of the community, why are the stats so high around the mortality and death rates in the Black and ethnic minority communities? So I'm really encouraging everyone to jump on that. That's going to be on Instagram Live at 7 o'clock. And yeah, just really thank you, everybody. Take care. To my Muslim brothers and sisters that are about to break fast, enjoy your food. Take time with the food. Do not mash up your stomachs. I'm trying to say. Craig looks ready, you know. Everybody, man, thank you. And our condolences again to the family who have just lost a loved one last night, yesterday, and to all of fallen soldiers and women. You know, our thoughts and our prayers are with you. To the families that are going through, keep on keeping on. To the mothers, to the fathers that are finding it hard during this time, during COVID-19. Our thoughts are with you, and I believe that together we can get through this. Together we can make a change. So thank you, everybody. Good night, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right.
No problem. Take care, guys.
Yes.